These are the stories that keep me up at night. The missing, the murdered, the mysteries that have gone unsolved in our own backyards. I've covered crime in North Texas for more than 25 years, and now I'm opening up my reporter's notebook to you, revisiting cold cases and crimes that made headlines. In the late 1990s, the sound of a train whistle would sometimes strike fear through communities across the United States. That's because there was a serial killer and he was hopping on and off trains, finding victims. Police eventually named him the Railroad Killer.
All I can say is that this man is very, very violent and that the killings he's committed have been very brutal, and he has to be stopped.
The FBI believes that he started killing in 1986 and that he killed more than 20 people before he was caught in July of 1999. He would change his appearance so often they couldn't link the crimes together.
This individual has used over 30 aliases during the course of some criminal activity that we know about.
His victims range from young to elderly, but one of the more brutal murders was 87-year-old Leafy Mason. She lived in Hughes Springs, and she was beaten with an antique fire iron.
My victim was approximately 50 yards from the railroad tracks. He entered through a window. He chose a weapon of opportunity in the home to commit the murder with, and he beat her to death.
It just shocked this small town, and it shattered their sense of peace.
Every time I drive by that house, I get a sickening feeling.
The killer left behind his fingerprints and DNA. He wasn't even trying to hide who he was.
There's not a great deal of care being taken to hide the fact that he is there.
From 1996 to 1998, he went on a killing spree. That's when the FBI formed a task force and came up with a name, Rafael Resendez Ramirez. They blanketed the country with flyers and put him on the top 10 most wanted list, right alongside Osama bin Laden.
We were really intent that there would not be a place in this country that this person could freely move around.
Eventually, they learned his name wasn't Resendez Ramirez. They tracked him to a small town in Mexico, and they got his birth certificate. They learned his name was actually Angel Maturino Resendez. Police believe that he would cross into the U.S. illegally dozens of times. In 1 year alone, he was deported 8 times. He was actually in the custody of Border Patrol, but no one checked his fingerprints. He was released, even though he was already wanted for murder at the time. He went on to commit 4 murders after that.
He has been in our custody on many occasions. Obviously, had we known that, we would have acted upon it.
There were at least 8 victims in Texas, so a Texas Ranger by the name of Drew Carter led the investigation. He tracked down Resendez's wife, Juliet Dominguez, to Rodeo, Mexico, where they lived together at times, and they had a 1-year-old child. We actually interviewed her while he was on the run.
He was very passive. He loved gardening. He loved gardening in the yard when the seasons came. He'd plant grapes and various fruits. He was very tranquil.
On July 13, 1999, after terrorizing the country, he turned himself in at the International Bridge in El Paso.
He pulled up right over there, right before you get to the primary booths, in a pickup truck. He got out. He was accompanied by some of his family members.
The surrender was voluntary, and it's something that he did on his own, and it was also the wishes of his family.
Using broken English, he tells News 8, "I knew the FBI was looking for me."
While he was in jail, he would write me letters.
The Mexican soldiers also helped me to get home.
He says sometimes he was picked up.
The police almost had me in another 6 or 7 places.
But he was let go because the computers weren't working. Eventually, I covered his trial in May of 2000 in Houston. He was tried for the murder of Claudia Benton. She was 39 years old. She was a Houston doctor, a mother, and a wife.
She had been stabbed to death, beaten 19 times in the head, causing 4 fractures. Her right arm was broken. She had bruises and abrasions of defensive wounds all over her body.
DNA and fingerprints linked him to the crime.
The chances are 1 in 6 billion that the contributor was someone other than that man in the white shirt.
Prosecutors were seeking the death penalty, but defense attorneys were trying to save his life by saying that he was legally insane and should not be executed.
The defendant, in his mind, thinks that these people are evil and deserve to die.
He was sentenced to death with his family in the courtroom.
It was just like a dream.
While on death row, I interviewed him, and it was the most disturbing interview of my career. He told me that he blamed the victims for the murders, that they were responsible for their own deaths.
I damage people that I have a reason, or I have concluded a reason, and I have a clear conscience in it.
I eventually covered his execution, and even to the end, he didn't show any remorse towards the victims. Truly, the most evil person I have ever met.